In this video, we're going to be looking at how to multiply and divide with mixed numbers and fractions. And before we start, we're going to look at how to make sure we're writing our answers in simplest form. If we look at this first example, number 1, 4/16, I know that this is not in simplest form because I can think of a number that will divide evenly into both 4 and 16. They still have some factors in common. I know that 4 will divide evenly into 4. 4 also divides evenly into 16, so I can divide the top and bottom both by 4. 4 divided by 4 gives me 1. And then 16 divided by 4 is 4. 4/16 written in simplest form is going to be 1/4. And I know 1/4 is in simplest form because there's no number that divides evenly into 1 and 4 other than 1. Now let's say that you didn't think about 4 right away. Maybe you thought, okay, they're both even numbers, so I know that they're divisible by 2. And we divided both of them by 2. 4 divides into 2 2 times. 16 divided by 2 gives me 8. And you would have gotten 2 8s. But when we look at 2 8s, we can see that there is another number. This can be simplified more. There's still factors in common between 2 and 8. I can divide the top and bottom by 2 again, and then this would give me 1/4. It's okay if you don't, like the first time we divided by 4, that was the largest factor that they had in common. So it's okay if you don't pick the largest one. You just have more, you may have more steps to get to the same answer. If we look at the second one, we have 30/36. We want to see if there's any number that I can divide that divides evenly into the top and the bottom. It has to divide evenly into both. And so this one, there are just like the first one, there's a couple of numbers that we could have chosen. 6 is a number that divides evenly into 30 and also into 36. You may have chosen 2. That would work as well. You would just have more than one step. 30 divided by 6 is 5, and 36 divided by 6 is 6. In simplest form, it would be written as 5 6. This is the way we want to make sure that we're entering all of our answers. Anytime you're dealing with fractions, we want our final answers to be in simplest form. We're also going to be looking at how to work with mixed numbers. And before we just jump into multiplying and dividing with mixed numbers, we do need to look at how to go from one form to the next. So if we look at these next 3 examples, these look a little different than our previous fractions. If you notice our first 2 examples, these are what we call proper fractions because the numerator is smaller than the denominator. The larger number is on the bottom. These next 3, we call these improper fractions, where the numerator is larger than the denominator. The larger number is on the top. These improper fractions mean that you have values that are greater than 1, and so they can be changed as a mixed number. You could go back and forth between mixed number and improper fraction. For example, you might have like 1 2/3, or you might have 5/3, just kind of depending on what you're working with. it might make more sense to have an answer in mixed number form than an improper fraction form. And we're going to look at how to go back and forth between mixed number and improper fraction. If we look at number 3, we have 7/3. We want to change that to an improper fraction. We want it to be written as a number and a whole number and a fraction instead of just improper fraction form. And the way we do that is through long division. We write out a long division. The top number goes underneath the division symbol. So we're always going to start out writing it like this. And then we're going to say, how many times will 3 go into 7? And it will go into 7 twice. Then we're going to multiply these two numbers together and write it here. 3 times 2 is 6. And we subtract and get 1. Now I'm going to take these 3 numbers and I'm going to write them in a mixed number. It went 2 complete times. That means 2 is going to be my whole number. 3 went into 7 2 complete times. Then my remainder is my numerator. And the 3 is going to be my denominator. 2 1/3. If you notice, the denominators are the same in the fractions. There's a 3 here, there's a 3 here. I could say I had 7/3 of something. I could say I had 2 1/3, and it's going to be the same pieces of a whole. It's just which one makes more sense for what you're working with. If I have number 4, 25/7, I'm going to do the same thing. The number on top goes underneath the radical. And I'm thinking, okay, how many times will 7 go into 25? And it goes 3 times, because 4 would be more than 25, so it would need to go 3 times. 7 times 3 is 21. And when I subtract, I get 4. And then I need to write this as a mixed number. So 3 is going to be my whole number. 4 is the numerator. And then 7 is my denominator. So 3 4/7, or 25/7. The denominators need to be the same. And then the same thing with number 5. I'm going to write out my long division. Now this one has 3 numbers. And so we could kind of look at it 2 ways. You could look at it as how many times will 6 go into 164 and do 1 complete piece, or we could do it in multiple steps. If I look at the 16, how many times will 6 go into 16? 6 times 2 is 12, so it'll go 2 complete times. 6 times 2 is 12, so I write that here. And then I'm going to subtract. 16 minus 12 is 4. Now this time I have some numbers left over that I haven't used yet, so I need to bring those down. That 4 will come down. And 6 will go into 44 7 times. And 6 times 7 is 42. When I subtract, I get 2. And then I'm going to take these values and I'm going to put them in mixed number form. 27 is my whole number. 2 is my numerator. And then 6 is my denominator. 27 2/6. Now something we didn't look at before is because those fractions were already in simplest form. But my fraction component of the mixed number is not in simplest form. So I'm going to have to reduce that fraction. I'm looking for a number that divides evenly into both 2 and 6. and that would be 2. If both numbers are even, we know it can at least divide by 2. And that makes that 27 1/3 would be my final answer. 27 1/3. Okay, so that is going from improper fraction to mixed number. When we get into operations with mixed numbers, we're also going to have to start with a mixed number and change it to an improper fraction. When we're working with these mixed numbers, it's much easier if when we get into multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, it's much easier if they're in improper fraction form. And so that's what we'll do every time, is change these into an improper fraction. And so to do that, what we do is we're going to multiply the 3 and the 4 together, so the whole number and the denominator. 4 times 3 is 12, and then we add the numerator. Plus 1 is 13. 4 times 3 is 12, add 1 is 13, and then we just keep the bottom number the same. It would just be 4. I could say I had 3 1/4, I could say I had 13/4, and it would be the same amount, just written in 2 different ways. This way is a little bit less work than changing it back to mixed number. Same thing with number 7. I'm going to say 8 times 8 plus 5 gives me 69. And then I keep the denominator the same, and that's 8. I would say 8 times 8 is 64 plus 5, and then keep the bottom number the same. Same thing with 8. 9 times 10 is 90, plus 7 is 97, and it would be 97 over 9. And that's how we go from mixed number to improper fraction. We're going to get a lot of practice on these when we get to our mixed number ones, because we're going to be using both every time we work with these mixed numbers. As we get into our operations with fractions, the first thing we'll look at is multiplication. When you're multiplying fractions, we're going to multiply straight across. We're going to multiply the whole numbers together. We're going to multiply, the numerators together, multiply the denominators together, and then we're going to simplify if needed. 4 times 3 is 12. 5 times 7 is 35. And that's my multiplication. And then I just look at, can this be simplified? Is there some number that divides evenly into both 12 and 35? And if I'm not sure, what I do is I look at the smaller number and I think about, okay, what are some things that divide evenly into 12? Well, 2 divides evenly into 12. But if I try to say 35 divided by 2, I'm going to get a decimal. I'm not going to get a whole number. So 2 is not going to work. 12 is divisible by 3. But again, if I try to say 35 divided by 3 in my calculator, I'm going to get a decimal. Same thing with 4, with 6. And so that's all the things that divide evenly into 12. And so I know that 12 over 35 would be simplest form, because there's nothing that divides evenly into both of those numbers. For number 10, I'm going to multiply straight across. 6 times 2 is 12. 3 times 14 is 42. And I want to make sure that I have my answer in simplest form. Since they're both even, I know they can at least divide by 2. But there is another number larger than 2 that we could use. If I think 6 divides evenly into both 12 and 42. 12 divided by 6 is 2. And 42 divided by 6 gives me 7. And so 2/7 would be 12 over 42 in simplest form. For number 11, I want to do the same thing. I want to multiply straight across. 7 times 9 is 63. And for the bottom, I have 9 times 7, which is also 63. This gives me the fraction 63 over 63. Any number divided by itself is just 1. And so this would simplify to the whole number 1. If we put that in our calculator, we would get 1. Any number divided by itself just gives you 1. This is multiplication of fractions. Now we're going to look at multiplication with mixed numbers. In this first one, we have 3 2/5 times 2 1/2. And what we want to do first, anytime that we're working with mixed numbers, what we're going to do is change them back into improper fractions. That's going to be our first step with all of these mixed numbers, is change them into improper fractions. So we would take our 3 2/5 and change it to a fraction. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. And then I keep the denominator the same, so that would have 5 on the bottom. And I'm multiplying. And then I'm going to change 2 1/2 to an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and that would make that 5 over 2, because I keep the denominator the same. Now I'm going to be multiplying 17 over 5 times 5 over 2. And remember, when we multiply fractions, we multiply straight across and then we reduce. So once I change it to an improper fraction, it just becomes like the problems we worked a few seconds ago. 17 times 5, I would multiply those together. And that would give me 85. And then 5 times 2 is 10. Now, if I'm looking at my answer, I have 85 over 10. This is an improper fraction. Since I started with mixed numbers in my answer, I want to end with mixed numbers. Since my problem had mixed numbers, I want to get my answer in mixed number form. And that's going to be the case with all of these that you'll work, is that if you start with mixed numbers, if possible, it's not always possible, but if we can, we want to get a mixed number answer. And so I'm going to take my fraction and I'm going to convert it back into a mixed number. And remember, we do that by long division. I'm going to say, how many times will 10 go into 85? Well, 10 will go into 85 8 times. 10 times 8 gives me 80. Once I have that value, I subtract. 85 minus 80 is 5. I don't have any other numbers to bring down, so I know I'm through with the division. And now I just need to take those values and put them in mixed number form. And I start with 8. And 5 is going to be my numerator. And 10 is my denominator. So 8 and 5/10. Now, I always want to look at the fraction portion of it to make sure that it's in simplest form. If I'm looking at 5/10, it's not in simplest form because I can reduce this fraction by 5. Five divided by 5 is 1, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. This would make this 8 1/2. Okay, so again, make sure on the quiz and test, if you're given a mixed number, if possible, we want to change it back to a mixed number for our answer. Let's look at 13. I have 9 3/4 times 1 2/3. Anytime I have a mixed number, first step is going to be change it to improper fraction. I would say 9 times 4 plus 3. That's going to give me 39 over 4. And then I look at the second one, and I would say 3 times 1 plus 2. That gives me 5. And then I keep the denominator the same, and so I would have 3. Now I'm just multiplying 39 over 4 times 5 over 3. I multiply straight across. 39 times 5, that gives me 195. So I have 195 in the numerator, and then 4 times 3 is 12, and so 12 is my denominator. Because I started with mixed numbers, I want to change this improper fraction to a mixed number. Now, if this value is not an improper fraction, if it was 12 over 95, then you can't change it to a mixed number, right? But this one is improper, and so we can change it to a mixed number, and that's what we need to do for our final answer. So I'm looking at how many times will 12 go into 19. 12 will go into 19 one time. And 19 minus 12 gives me 7. But I still have another number to bring down. I need to bring this 5 down, and that makes that 75. And now I'm looking at, okay, well, how many times will 12 go into 75? 12 can go into 75 6 times. And if you're not sure, this may be where you need to do some guess and check in the calculator. 12 times 5, 12 times 7, just kind of look and see what gets you close to 75. Then I would say 12 times 6 is 72. And I would subtract and get 3. This gives me 16 as my whole number, 3 as my numerator, and 12 as my denominator. So I have the fraction 16 and 3 over 12. I need to make sure that my fraction part is in simplest form. If I'm looking at 3/12, there is a number that divides evenly into both 3 and 12, and that would be 3. Three divided by 3 gives me 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. This would be 16 and 1/4. When we're multiplying with mixed numbers, we change them to improper fractions. We multiply straight across, and then we convert that mixed number back into, we convert that fraction back into a mixed number. And then the last thing is division with fractions and mixed numbers. When we're dividing fractions, we're going to keep the first value the same. So we have 3/8. It's going to stay just like it is. We're going to flip the second fraction and make that 2 over 1. And then we're going to change the division to multiplication. And you've probably heard several different ways to refer to this. You may have heard multiply by the reciprocal. That just means multiply by the second value flipped. Sometimes we say the KFC method: keep, flip, change, keep the first fraction the same, flip the second fraction, and change the division to multiplication. Once I change the second fraction, now it just becomes a multiplication problem just like we did earlier. We're going to multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. 8 times 1 is 8. And we get 6 over 8. And then we can simplify this by 2. And we get 3/4. It doesn't simplify anymore, and so I can keep my answer as 3/4. I want to do the same thing for 15. I'm going to keep, flip, change. I'm going to keep the first fraction the same. I'm going to flip the second fraction and make that 8 over 5. And then I'm going to change the division to multiplication. So now I have 9/11 times 8 over 5. And I multiply straight across. It's just like the problems earlier. I go straight across. 9 times 8 is 72. 11 times 5 is 55. So for this fraction, or this answer, this is an improper fraction. The top is larger than the bottom. This could be changed to a mixed number. And as far as answering questions on the quiz and the test, if you started with just 2 fractions, no mixed numbers, this is an acceptable answer for the test, 72 over 55. Or you could change it as a mixed number. It's going to accept either one. However, if you had started with a mixed number, then you need to go that extra step and change it to a mixed number, okay? But it's fine to leave it as an improper fraction because that's what we were working with when we started. So if it's a fraction when you start, you can leave it as a fraction. If it's a mixed number when you start, it needs to be a mixed number when you're finished at your answer. But if you do leave it as a fraction, we need to make sure that this is in simplest form. And this is. It's not going to simplify any further. So I can accept this answer. And then we want to look at our last one. We want to do the same thing. We keep the first fraction the same. We're going to flip our second fraction and get 7 over 6. And then we're going to change the division to multiplication. Once we do this, we're going to multiply straight across. 12 times 7 is 84. And then 13 times 6 is 78. Now this is kind of the same thing as 15 in that it's an improper fraction. And so we could change it to mixed number, or I could simplify and leave it as an improper fraction. If I'm going to leave it as an improper fraction, I need to look and see if there's a number that divides evenly into both 84 and 78. And so I could reduce the top and bottom by 6. And again, if you're not sure, it's just kind of guess and check. What are some numbers that divide evenly into 84? Once you find one, see if it also divides evenly into 78. But we know if they're both even, we can at least reduce it by 2. We know that that will work. 84 divided by 6 is 14. 78 divided by 6 is 13. And that would be simplest form. There's no other factors in common. And it would be 14 over 13. And then our last problems are mixed numbers. Just like we did with the multiplication of mixed numbers with division, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change it back to improper fraction. Then we're going to divide, and then we're going to change it to a mixed number. I want to change them to improper fractions. 3 times 3 plus 1, that gives me 10. I keep the bottom number the same, so it'll be 3. Then I'm going to change 2 and 2/5 to improper. 5 times 2 plus 2 is 12. And then I keep the bottom the same as 5. Now, here's this step we don't want to forget. I'm dividing two fractions, which means I have to keep the first one the same. I have to flip the second one. And I'm going to multiply. So don't forget this step. Only when you divide do you flip the second one. Only in division. It's the only time you ever do it. All right, and then now we want to multiply straight across. 10 times 5 is 50. And 12 times 3 is 36. So I get 50 over 36. Since my problem originally had mixed numbers, I'm not going to be able to put 50 over 36 even if I simplify it. I'm going to have to go ahead and change that to a mixed number for my answer, because it's improper fraction. Okay, if it wasn't improper fraction, then I couldn't change it to a mixed number. 36 will go into 50 one time. When I subtract, 50 minus 36 is 14. I don't have any other numbers to bring down, so I know I'm finished dividing. And then to write it as a mixed number, 1 is my whole number, 14 is my numerator, and 36 is my denominator. So 1 and 14 over 36. Now every time I need to make sure and check that this fraction part is in simplest form. They're both even, so I know I can at least divide it by 2. Or I could try to look for a number larger and see if one of those would work. But I'm going to divide by 2. And 14 divided by 2 is 7. 36 divided by 2 is 18. And there's not going to be anything that simplifies into 7 and 18. So that's going to be my final answer. 1 and 7 over 18. All right, with 18, I'm going to change these to improper fractions. 8 times 4 plus 3, that gives me 35. And then I have 8 as my denominator. I'm going to divide. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. And so that gives me 5 over 4 because I keep the bottom number the same. Okay, since I'm dividing, and only when I divide, I keep flip change. So keep the first one the same. And flip the second one. And now we're going to be multiplying. When I multiply, I'm going to go straight across. 35 times 4, that's 140. And then 8 times 5 is 40. 140 over 40, that's an improper fraction. Since I started with mixed numbers, I want to convert my answer back into mixed number form. And remember, we do that by long division. The top number goes underneath the division sign. 40 goes into 140. It's going to go 3 times. And then I say 40 times 3 is 120. And I subtract. 40 minus 120 just gives me 20. I don't have any other numbers to bring down, so I know I'm finished with my division. And I just write this as a whole number. 3 is my whole number. And then I write my fraction part, 20 over 40. I know this can be simplified some more. So I could try 10, 5, 20. Let's say I choose 10. I'm going to divide both of these by 10. This would give me 3. 20 divided by 10 is 2. 40 divided by 10 is 4. That gives me 3 2/4. Well, 2/4 can still simplify by 2, so I have to go one more step and say 3 1/2 as my final answer. All right, and then for the last one, same thing. 8 times 10 is 80, plus 7 is 87. And then I place that value over 10 to keep my denominator the same. 3 times 15, and then I add 9. That gives me 54. And then I keep 15 on the bottom to keep the denominator the same. And then because I'm dividing, that's when I'm going to flip that second fraction. So I'm keeping 87 over 10. I'm writing the second fraction as 15 over 54, and then I'm going to multiply those two values together. So I'm going to multiply straight across. This is when I'm going to get into some fairly large numbers. 87 times 15, you may have some large numbers when you're working some of these practice problems. 87 times 15 gives me 1,305 for the numerator. And then I have 10 times 54, which is 540. This again is improper, and I started with improper fractions. I started with mixed numbers, so I want to change this answer into mixed number form by using long division. I'm looking for how many times will 540 go into 1305. And so I might just guess and check and see. 3 would be too many. So I can say 540 times 2, and that's going to be what I would need. So 540 goes into 1305 2 times. 540 times 2 was 1,080. And when I subtract, I would get 225. So 2 with a remainder of 225. When I write this as a mixed number, I get 225 over 540. This would be my mixed number. All right. So for this one, we're going to have to kind of simplify a fairly large number, 225 and 540. You might want to start off maybe trying by 5 and see if that reduces it down to something that we recognize. And we might just want to try some larger numbers and see what divides evenly. Maybe try 35 or 55 or to see if that would work. They both will reduce by 45. 45, they both divide evenly into 45. But you could start out with maybe 5 and just kind of keep going from there if you couldn't find a larger number. But 225 divided by 45 gives me 5. 225 divided by 45. And then 540 divided by 45 gives me 12. So this reduces into 2 and 5/12.